I'd like to introduce and ask Clarke and Mitch Mahoney to come up to the stage. Maree is a Yorta Yorta, Wamba Wamba, Mutti Mutti and Bunwurrung woman who grew up in Mildura and has been practising living artist working in Melbourne for over 3 decades. Maree is known for her open and collaborative approach to cultural practice. She consistently works in the intergenerational collaboration to revive dormant cultural knowledge and uses technology to bring new audiences to contemporary southeastern Aboriginal arts. In 2021, she was the subject of a major survey exhibition, Clarke, Ancestral Memories, at the National Gallery of Victoria. The first Aboriginal woman with traditional ties to Bunwurrung country, where the NGV is built, to have a solo exhibition there. That's huge. So congratulations again. It was absolutely magnificent. Yes. And a abridged version of this also went to the Australian Embassy in Paris, which has been on this year. That's fantastic, Ree, that your work got over to Paris. Other exhibitions and awards include Tarrang, the Art Gallery of South Australia in Adelaide, the National at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Reversible Destiny at the Tokyo Photographic Museum, Tokyo, and Vivid, Sydney 2023. And also the King and Wood Mallison's Contemporary Art Prize, which she was awarded as the Victorian Artist Award. And most recently has been awarded the Yelwinga Fellowship through the Australian Centre for Contemporary Art. Maree is a living legend, I have to say, and has been an incredible mentor and friend to me, as you are to many people in Victoria, so I love you very much. And Mitch Mahoney, another deadly person, and Mitch is an emerging Bunwurrung artist with connections to Barkindji through his dad's side. Born in Mildura, he has lived in the Hunter Valley for the past 13 years. Mitch specialises in the revitalisation of southeastern Aboriginal practice, including possum skin cloaks, kangaroo tooth necklaces, line work drawings and southeastern Aboriginal design. In 2021, he led the public art project Weaving Sustainable Culture at Footscray Community Arts Centre with over 200 community members. Together they made 6-metre-long reed canoes that reflect the 6 seasons of the Bunwurrung country. Mitch regularly collaborates with his aunt, Maree, on projects including the eel trap and a large-scale biodegradable sculpture that was immersed in the Maribyrnong River in 2021. Mitch is also working on commissions for the National Gallery of Victoria and the Metro Tunnel project. And Mitch was an assistant curator to me a few years ago. You were here for about a year at Museums Victoria, and I was very, very sad when you left, but you know, you've got to do your thing, and the work that you did here was absolutely phenomenal, so thank you for your contribution into the collection here. So I'll get off the stage and let you talk.
Okay. Thanks, Kimberly, and thanks for the invitation to come and speak. So my name's Maree Clarke. I've been a practising artist living and working in Melbourne for over 30 years. And I think I was one of the first artists to actually come into the Melbourne Museum when it was based at the State Library and they started digitising the collection. So I was able to go in and look at something like 10,000 images in a day. And I started printing off all of the different artefacts with the carved designs from all the language groups of Victoria. And then many, many years later, when we started doing the Possum Skin Cloak project in the lead up to the Commonwealth Games in 2006, I was able to give back to community those designs from their own traditional areas and having artists say, my art makes sense to me now, because they were already ancestrally having these designs in their artwork. And that to me was priceless, because not everybody gets the opportunity to come into the museum or travel the world and see these incredible things. But my practice is about doing research not only here but overseas in museum collections, learning how to put things together and pass that knowledge on to people like Mitch, Mahoney and other people in my family and other community members through mentoring and, doing a whole range of things. So the green button on this, yes. Where am I pointing this? So these are some carved shields in Saffron Walden, a little museum in the UK. And to me, when I walked into this space, it was still like, time had stood still. It's a black fella standing on the rock with his family and everything's just frozen in time. Even though we are the oldest continuous living culture in the world, I would ideally love one day to take community to these places and give them a story, a community, and breathe life back into these objects. Whoops. The British Museum, that's a kangaroo tooth necklace using all of the teeth of a kangaroo. One possum pelt and numerous carved objects, and these are all from the southeast. In Florence, and I'm able to now identify Southeast Australian Aboriginal objects. And they also have these beautiful sort of body adornments and carving tools and stone axes. And right next door to this glass case is Captain Cook's glass case with all of his objects. And next year I've got an artist residency in Florence for a month to make work in the museum and then exhibit it over there. Pitt Rivers Museum at Oxford University that also have a kangaroo tooth necklace and different objects. Berlin that have Blandowski's possum pelt with no fur on it, just all these little pock marks around it. They had a few William Barrack paintings that were just sitting on the floor when I was there in the storeroom. And they have all the bundis and shields and things hanging up like sausages in a butcher store. And then from those, I sort of created my own sort of take on those shields. And so the top one represents my mum, dad and grandmother, and the one with the red, I'm one of 11. So this represents my brothers, sisters and all of my nieces and nephews. And then I did this piece earlier this year, I think it was, called Remember Me, and did all these canoe scar shapes painted onto, with language words painted onto calico. And I had the words repeated, and the three middle sections I painted with glow-in-the-dark paint. Then I got Mandy Nicholson to record the language words whispered 3 times. So it was like, say my name 3 times and you'll remember me. Excuse me. And this is it sort of during the day and all the tannin coming off the tree that, they just look like canoe scar trees embedded. And then this was it at night, so it became another thing. And that sound of the language words being whispered through the bush was fantastic. And then I guess this is when I first started working with the sticks and objects from home up in Mildura. And so I'd gone out bush, collected these sticks with my brother Sydney John, and it was just after a flood, so I had to walk through all this mud, drag these sticks up. They're 2 to 3 metres tall, and this was for an exhibition at the Art Centre in 2010, and it was around life, death and spirituality, and I didn't know anything about my own traditional mourning practices. So after doing research and researching museum collections and talking to elders in my family, I was able to make this work, which is Kopi mourning caps where women and men would wear Kopi, a gypsum clay, on their head, weighing up to 7 kilos, anywhere from a few weeks to, several months or until it fell off your head. And that was to feel the weight of your grief. And then at the end of that period, the Kopi would be taken off and placed on the grave. It's sitting on a bed of red dirt, which is a practice where I'm from. And in front are the stories of loss, sorrow and mourning of the 38 Aboriginal women that I worked with for this particular installation. And then these are 500 sticks that Mitch Mahoney went and collected for me, again from country up on the Maree. It was about how many trips? About 6 trips in and out, like...
A dozen hour-and-a-half trips.
Yeah.
On the dirt road.
Up on the Maree, back to my sister's place. We'd taken over her whole front yard with these sticks and, it was pretty phenomenal. They're now housed just outside of Melbourne on a friend's property because I live in inner city Melbourne and they just won't fit. And then I've also had my sticks cast in glass. So this is in a light well between Wesley Church and the new Federal Police Building, just on Lonsdale Street. This is a huge Coolaman that we've just had cast in cast iron for the new Munro Library here in Melbourne. And my husband brought this back from Tasmania. It's golden sassafras. And Mitch helped him carve this out. And then most recently, I got a commission to make a new work for the new promenade at the new Mirvac Tower number 9 down in Docklands. And I proposed a 7-metre river reed canoe with 5 camp dogs and a ball of string and a fishhook. So my husband and Mitch had gone out, collected all of the river reeds and built for me a 7.5-metre river reed canoe that's going to be cast in bronze. I'm still yet to carve my five camp dogs. And then before it goes to Brisbane to be cast in bronze, I want to take it down to Williamstown Beach, photograph my nieces and nephews in the canoe, light a fire in the front of it so that it's used before it goes off to be cast, and then other people will be eventually hanging out on it. And that's it. It's a pretty amazing structure.
Yeah.
And then all of these experiences that I do, I share with this fella, and he is now doing these incredible things, getting his own commissions and continuing to tell stories. Yeah. I'm going to pass it over to Mitch.
I'll just quickly checking our time. Okay. Yeah. So like Maree said, it's been that process of the last 5 or so, well, my whole life since I've been growing up. I've been going to possum skin cloak workshops. I've been meeting community, spending time listening to people tell their stories, listening to people depict their stories on cloaks as a little fella, sometimes understanding what's going on, other times probably just hanging out with the other kids. But as I grew and kind of got to a bit more of a mature age of only really 16, I actually started, well, Maree came and talked to me about making a possum skin cloak for major work and what it means, and talked about the things that we had done with community and the time that we have spent learning about storytelling and representing ourselves. And through that, she brought down a couple pelts and a tea towel that she used as an example to sew together possum skins.
So for his 16th birthday, I flew to Newcastle with a burner, 3 pelts, needle and thread. So that evening, we sat at the dining room table. I'm teaching him blanket stitch by sewing 2 tea towels together to show you the stitch. And then he got out the sketch pad and started sketching up his first possum skin cloak. Yeah, he hasn't stopped.
Yeah, I haven't stopped since. It's one of those things 16-year-old me probably didn't need to be shown again. You'd shown me plenty of times before that. And so, you know, through that process, it was that thing of being lucky enough to have that older generation who have done the work, who have gone out to museums, who have spent that time reclaiming cultural knowledge and teaching us the way to do things traditionally, and teaching us the proper way of doing things slowly and learning and spending time with community, and then to go on as we grow to make different works that are, you know, very vibrant and colourful and different. These are works that I've done with my mum and sister. You can see on the left image, especially that top central image, is one of Maree's symbols that she's gifted to the family, where she's, you know, made these symbols to represent men and women, and then there's something that we've now started to pass down through our family and used as our recognised symbols. And that's something that's, you know, really starting to evolve with our family group, and hopefully something that, you know, we continue to share with next generations and with other people as well. And so from there, I had all that teaching from Auntie Maree and from the family and from mum and dad and all of those kind of things, and I started to go on to get to a stage, you know, being a young fellow and growing up and spending time in Melbourne with Auntie Maree, to then just last year spending some time travelling and going around the country and just kind of hanging out. I don't know how to describe it to people. It's just spending that time to go where you want to go, when you want to go, and having a bit of freedom to kind of figure things out, I think, as everyone does when they kind of get to that age. And throughout that process, I had a few moments of making things. This is one of the killer boomerangs that I made in response to wanting very desperately to get a hold of a bunch of emus that were hanging out around the campsite. Not that I was successful. But it was that moment of making things in the right time and spending that time almost drawing on that knowledge that you learn as you're, it's hard to try, just spending time with community. It's that knowledge that you learn without knowing that you're learning it. From watching other people make killer boomerangs, from being in the yard when Uncle Lenny's carving out killer boomerangs out of old decking and stuff like that, to then have the opportunity, you know, to be out in the bush and find a nice piece of mulga that worked perfectly for my first ever killer boomerang. Along with that, learning, you know, the different techniques that come from other communities. For me, yidakis are not something that I really make, but this was something that was gifted to me when I happened to camp right next to a bunch of mob who had just come down to see the family at Uluru. So it's also that learning of the importance of community and the importance of, when you're out there and you see other mob, going up and saying, hey, and this is who I am, and, you know, hanging out and having a yarn and sharing stories and spending a couple of what probably would have been very boring nights on my own in the bush if I hadn't have been taught the importance of connecting with communities. So from there, this year I had my first ever Coolaman season this winter. I'd had very kind of limited opportunities to make Coolamans. I remember as a young fella, one of my uncles taking me down to the bottom of our property up in New South Wales and carving out a Coolaman, or it was a shield, I can't quite remember, and sitting there and him constantly telling me, just sit still, it's going to happen, you know, it'll come off, and I'm sitting here going, what are you doing, what's going on? So from that experience to then spending other time with community watching them make Coolamans, I had my first ever Coolaman season, and I spent some time out in Barkindji country connecting with mob up there on my father's country, which is something that I have not done in my entire life, and as well as that, some time down here on Bunurong country, hanging out with younger Carolyn and Auntie Maree and the family, and making some other Coolamans. And so these are just some that are on Menindee country at the end of a month of travelling through Victoria, kind of the ones that I'd collected. It's funny, there's so many in that image on the right, yet I think most of them have been gifted or have ended up somewhere else. I think I only have one at home now. And that was something that was sparked from the announcement that my first baby is on its way, and it was something where that Coolaman season was a chance to make that Coolaman for the baby and have that opportunity to kind of embed that straight off the bat with our teachings. So there we are, Uncle Sid in the middle and me making my Coolaman. So this Coolaman's out at Warraku, it's the station that my grandfather used to manage. His son Sid now works there, and in that central one it was the first time to, from him telling me to shut up and listen when I was a little young fella showing me how to make the shield, to then him coming out and me showing him that I've learnt the proper way to do things and actually had a chance to kind of display that. On the left is the baby Coolaman that was taken from On Country here, just down at a local park one night. Luckily they didn't see the fire. So it was that opportunity, to kind of get those things from country and make a Coolaman for myself, and then also make a Coolaman for the baby. And then the far one is Coolaman out Scar Tree that's out near Malden Way on Mount Tarrang. So as well as that, throughout my time of travelling around and learning, I've just started to really, I don't know, it's hard to explain the ways, but just those teachings that you get from country, those things that you learn when you spend that time out in the bush, have really started to come through. And this particularly painted up shield on the left is a really key, I don't know, almost like one of those click moments for me about learning about how country works, and Coolaman making is one of those processes that has really informed that for me, where this shield was meant to be a Coolaman. It was cut to be a Coolaman. It was cut for my little cousin Alice. It was all bent up and ready to go, and I left it with her to dry, so when I came back this time it would all be ready to go and I could shape it for it and clean it, and it decided, I don't want to be a Coolaman, I want to be a shield. And so it folded itself out nice and flat and hardened really well, and it kind of, in a strange way, told us that that was kind of the way, what it needed to be and what it wanted to be. And because of that, I just decided, well, then we'll make it into a shield, and I painted it up for her and painted the story of the river system, because she comes from the Maree as well. And for her, she's a young girl, she's only 18, and she's going up in the world and doing all these things and going out and being very responsible and doing very well. And I think a shield and a bit of protection is something that she needed at that time, and so her Coolaman obviously decided that's what she needed, and who am I to heat it back up and try to bend it back into a Coolaman? So we made her shield and gifted it to her as a bit of a sign to, look after herself and make sure she stays protected as she travels. And then from there, I think, this is that, for me, that process of learning from Maree, learning from all of our ancestors and our elders, and kind of embedding that practice. This is that process of cutting off as I've been learning. This was a large kind of shield Coolaman piece that I had carved, and we'd done it nice in the cold winter up at Mum and Dad's property, and making sure that we heal the trees properly. How are we going for time? Thank you. And so, different examples of just the way we've gone about. I've tried, as well as learning cultural things and learning to do things properly, and positioning and the temperature and understanding to pay respects whenever you're on country. Also learning a bit of making sure I take photos of the things I do, which is very much so, if anyone's ever experienced hunting Maree, documentation is everything. Everything needs to be photographed and made sure that you have full documentation. So I've tried really, really hard, because I am a terrible documenter, and I always do something and go, I did this great thing, but I've got no photos to show you. So I've been trying very hard. Oh, hang on, can we go back one? Oh, anyway. So, as well as that, this was the first year where I was lucky enough to go and make a red gum canoe. And this canoe will be for the NGV Country Road collaboration, and it was a work where I had dreamed up making a stringy bark canoe originally, and as the story had gone on and I had spent time in Victoria and I'd had conversations with people, I was lucky enough to have a conversation with Nina Cumston, who very graciously shared her contact with Dave Doyle, who's a Barkindji fella up on country. And Dave, we called him up and said, you know, we'd really like to make a canoe, and would it be possible to come out onto country and do it? And he immediately just said, absolutely, when you want to come. And we were there a week later, hanging out with him and his family out on the Barker, making a red gum canoe. And it's something for me that I never imagined I'd get the opportunity to. And it was a truly great moment to connect with other Barkindji mob, which is something that I have very little opportunity to do up until now. And to be greeted so warmly, and to have someone like Dave and his family just say, sure, come out, let's do it, let's make a canoe, he was more than happy for us to show up, spend time with him, share knowledge, talk about bush tucker, help us make a canoe, and then send us off with it, which I thought was just beyond generous. Couldn't have imagined it ever. And so, we spent our time out on the Barker, making the canoe and healing the scar once we had taken it. Oh, did that where it ends? I thought we had a few more images. Oh, is it? Sorry, I thought we had a few more images. Can we go back to that last image then? Sorry, everybody. I thought there were some images of the heating. And so, it was one of those things where I think going forward, all of this time had been spent as a young fella, being lucky enough to be involved in possum skin cloak making, to be lucky enough to be involved in other community stories and to help tell them and share those stories. And now I've started to get to a stage where I have to think about how I'm going to pass those stories on while learning at the same time, and the way in which I do that. And I think for us, it's an amazing thing to be involved in the Symposium of more than a Tarrang, and to have spent so much time this year with Tarrang and on country, interacting and thanking and learning how to be responsible when interacting, and learning how to heal, what you take properly and give thanks for what you take, and also learning the importance of those items that you take, but also learning that some of the most important parts of that process is who you meet, how you interact, the relationships that you have along the way, and just continuing on that learning, which has been something that has been, invaluable. And I think as like a young man, it's something that I hope to kind of hold as we move forward, and it's something that's really been passed on from Auntie Maree and Uncle Lenny and Pop and Mum and Dad and all of our families. And I would hope to see that, from me onward, we have generations that are just continuing on those practices.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's really, what it's all about. And thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.